Well. Welcome back to weekly video devotionals with Paul. These are my attempt in the midst of a pandemic to help make Jesus more beautiful, more believable for me and for you in a way that both of us, all of us, can yield our lives to Him even during these trying circumstances. So that's my hope for these weekly videos today. I have a thought for you that comes out of Romans 1. It is the latest in my mostly daily Bible reading plan. And I share the verse I'm about to share today because when I read it, it was Saturday morning when I read it, I had a new appreciation for how the writer of this verse felt or might have felt when he wrote it. So here's the verse. It's from Romans 1, and it's verses 11 to 12. Romans 1, verse 11 to 12. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to strengthen you. That is, that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I long to see you, to strengthen you, and to be mutually encouraged in your faith and in mine. So on Saturday morning when I read this, the next day was going to be the fourth consecutive Sunday that our church was not able to gather on Sunday. And it looks like at least a minimum another 4 Sundays are going to go by before we can gather as a church family again. So all the stuff that is just so beautiful sometimes on a Sunday morning, the hugs, the handshakes, the laughter, the drinking of coffee together, the sound of the room when everybody is singing together, the body language when a particular word from the Bible is heard, or a prayer given, or a lyric from a song, or a thought from a sermon, the body language when that resonates with the soul, all of that stuff I miss. In our gatherings is not the same, even though we have all the technology that we have. It's just not quite the same. And I've never lived through a time before when I was prevented from seeing my church family before now. But the Apostle Paul, the writer of Romans here, had. He longed to see his brothers and sisters that were in Rome. That's who he's writing to. But he wasn't able to. Now, it wasn't because of a global pandemic that Paul was kept from seeing his church family in Rome. It was because of his pastoral work in Corinth. That's where he's writing the book of Romans from. That's the city. He has his missionary work in Asia that's keeping him busy, and he has a trip to Jerusalem that he's got to take all before he can go see his faith family in Jerusalem, and that kept him away from them. But when he wrote those verses, I longed to see you for those reasons. It landed freshly. It landed new on my ears because I felt that same thing. And I've never really understood the depth of that verse that I think Paul may have been writing out of. The fact that he longed to see his church family for the sake of strengthening their faith and for mutual encouragement for each other as well. So maybe that idea, maybe that verse lands similarly with you, and that you miss the gathering of your church family as well. Maybe you are feeling the lack of not just the social pieces of what happens when we gather, but because you need it. You need it for the strengthening of your faith, the reminders of what it is that we believe and why, and for the mutual encouragement that happens when we gather as a church. Like people encouraging one another. It's not just a one-way street for anybody. So I can't wait to get back together with you in person and encourage you and have you encourage me so that we can remain steadfast in our faith in the face of trying circumstances and emotions and feelings. But with that, it's more than just the missing of the church family that stood out to me in this passage, even though that landed freshly in my ears. What then stood out to me, what I noticed is that what Paul did out of this longing that he expressed in Romans 1, he didn't just feel sad about it and go on with his day and go on with his work. He did something about it. He picked up a pen and a paper, or whatever the Apostle Paul wrote with, a feather with some ink and a scroll, I don't really know. But he picked up his pen and his paper and he wrote a letter to those that he longed to encourage, that those he longed to strengthen, and that those he longed to be encouraged and strengthened by. And as a result of that, we have the book of Romans. A letter that not only strengthened and encouraged the church family in Rome, but has strengthened and encouraged the church family for 2,000 years. Now, I'm not thinking that any of us are writing the next book of the New Testament, but I wonder if there's something in here for us where we can pick up our own pen, we can pick up our own paper, and we can write to somebody, physically write a letter expressing the idea that we miss them, sharing with something that we hope might strengthen their faith, and maybe even asking them to write us back with something that they think might encourage us in our own journey. See, I have a few handwritten notes that people have given me over the years, and they were given to me meaning to encourage me in my own personal journey, in ministry, or whatever it might be. But I keep those letters that were handwritten to me for personal encouragement. And I return to them when the days are dark and the nights are long. They feed my soul. They feed my faith. Not just the first time I read them, but every time that I go back to them as well. So here's my encouragement and my request for all of you. Can we take this longing that we have, that we're missing the church gathering, and redeem it by physically writing a letter, a note, to someone in your church family to encourage them and strengthen their faith? Perhaps consider doing that this week. It's absolutely right and good to miss the gathering of the church. If we're not feeling the lack of that, then we probably need to take the time to self-examine why we're not feeling the lack of that. But my encouragement to us is, can we be like Paul and be motivated by the feeling to reach out and write to one another? Act on that longing and redeem this time where we can't be together physically. We can still strengthen each other. We can still mutually encourage one another. So I hope you take the time to do that this week. If you have any questions on this Devo or any of the other Devos that we've put up or anything else we're putting up on our social media or any other questions about who we are, please feel free to email me, paul@terranovachurch.org, or just direct message us here on any of our social media platforms. Blessings, my friend, and be well.